hibernating and booting into another OS, will my file systems be corrupted? Important. If you came here looking for an answer to this question, please read all the answers below. There are some testimonials from people who have lost data doing this. If you plan to do this regularly, I highly recommend that you test for yourself. Original question. Suppose I have Windows and Linux installed on the same computer. If I hibernate Windows, can I boot into Linux without corrupting the Windows file system when I resume Windows? What about the other way around? What if I hibernate one, boot into the other, and mount the hibernated file system read/write? Read only. If this is unsafe, is there any way to detect the hibernated state of the other OS and prevent mounting its file system? Basically, how far can I push this before it breaks, and how dangerous is it near the edge? I think I know the answers to some of the above questions, but for other ones, I have no idea, and for obvious reasons I have not tested this on my own computer. If someone has tested these, please enlighten the rest of us. I'm not necessarily looking for a specific answer to every question. I'll accept any response that answers a reasonable portion. Edit. Let me clarify that when I say hibernate, I mean the process of writing the contents of RAM to the hard disk and completely powering down the computer. In this state, powering the computer back on brings you through the BIOS and bootloader again, and you could theoretically select another operating system on a multi-boot system. Anyway, on with the original question. My results. Okay, after everyone's assurances that this would work, I tested it for myself. I set up Ubuntu to remount all NTFS file systems and external drives read-only before hibernating. There was no need for a similar Windows setup because Windows does not read Linux file systems. Then, I tried alternately hibernating one operating system and resuming the other, back and forth a few times. I even tried mounting the Windows file system from Ubuntu read-write, and creating a few files. Windows didn't complain when I resumed. So, in conclusion, you can more or less freely hibernate in a dual-boot Windows/Linux scenario. Note that I did not test a dual Linux/Linux co-hibernation situation. If you have 2 or more Linux installs and you hibernate one of them, you might be able to corrupt the file system by mounting it from another.
I regularly hibernate my Windows XP and boot over USB into Ubuntu. Works flawlessly. There is a difference between standby mode and hibernate mode. The OS state is completely flushed to the disk and your hardware is powered off. If you power up the machine and boot into some other OS, it has no impact on the hibernated OS. You can keep as many OSes hibernated as you want. As an example, you could have multiple Ubuntu installations, say, one per USB flash drive. And hibernate each, unplug the drive, and boot into another one. There is no edge here because there is no stacking/chaining effect. The hibernated USB sticks in this examples are all independent of each other. Across a power-cycled machine. One small downside of a hibernated C:\drive and booting into another OS is you would not be able to mount the hibernated boot partition in the new OS. The partition is locked with hibernation. It will be corrupted if edited in that state.
There's nothing wrong with what you mentioned. Even if you mounted the hibernated file system, the contents of the hibernation are saved to a large file on the disk. As long as you don't touch this file or any important system files, obviously, then nothing will happen. If you change the contents of a partition from another OS after you turn the system off, the original partition will still boot with no problems. It's the same thing in hibernation. Just be sure that when mounting/unmounting the partition, you don't damage any system files or drive header information, e.g. MBR, file journals, although this point has nothing to do with hibernation, and more just a common warning we all need to know.
I always hibernate Windows before booting in anything else. Windows is just too slow to start from scratch. But it is dangerous to write to the partition of hibernated OS, because some of the FS tables are still in memory, well, in hibernation file but not in the FS, applications still have handles to some files and generally file system state is kind of unstable. But you can mount that partition read-only, this way it will stay exactly the same as before hibernation and Windows won't notice a thing. As for a suggestion about mounting it normally and just stay away from system files, it is not a good idea. Relocation of a file content might happen, MFT might be changed, access time attributes will be changed, all those things might seriously corrupt a file system. It is not so dangerous with FAT, but it is really dangerous with NTFS, as it is far more complicated and have far more state in the memory.
Booting Windows over an hibernated Linux is not a good idea. I just lost 20 GB of data in a shared NTFS partition. I hibernated Ubuntu Lucid one day, and the next I fired up my computer. Some update messed up the saved option in Grub, so instead of booting Ubuntu again as it should, it started Windows 7. When I came back with my coffee, I just went on using it without recalling Ubuntu was in bear mode. I probably accessed music, Firefox profile, documents, downloads, and games from the shared partition. The next time I switched to Ubuntu, I saw the waking up from hibernation message. Dang. But I expected it to fail at waking and soft reboot instead, as happened the previous time I tried this in my karmic times. But no, it woke up alright. Cool. Or not. I quickly realized a directory in the root of the shared partition was now empty. I think the only programs accessing the shared partition on resuming were Quatlibit, Music Player, and Transmission, BitTorrent client. I went back to Windows, where I couldn't even open the directory. Trying to dir it in shell-produced file not found. Corrupted. Still, the partition's free space had not increased, so my 20 GB were probably still there, safe from being overwritten. Maybe. But how to get to them? A little research provided little help, and made my hopes even more bleak. I ran ScanDisk, check for errors, without auto-repair, since I don't wanted to risk it fixing things by further destroying my data. The result was not very informative. Errors found. Run with auto-repair. Unknown to me, seemingly it also marked the partition to be automatically checked on next boot. I powered off and went away, and came back with easy recovery later. The computer started with me not paying attention, as usual, and when I looked, CheckDisk was already spewing errors in full swing, which it did for some 10 minutes. Oh well, here goes nothing. Fortunately, I did lit a candle for Santa Tecla recently, and after Windows started, my data was back, all of it as far as I can tell, though some files ended up in found .000. So yes, this had a happy ending. You'll forgive the dramatic suspense, but that's to drive a point across. Back up your data. And, in my case, keep the backup up to date. And of course, be extra careful with hibernation and shared partitions.
If you want to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing.